What is up, everybody? Welcome to your Thursday night treat. Grab you something cold to drink, kick your shoes off. Let's go. It's time for Doc Talk. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Doc Talk, episode 12. Yeah, we've made it 12 episodes. We missed a week, but we're back. We've got one old guest, one new guest tonight, and kind of let you guys go around and introduce yourselves, tell a little bit about yourselves, and go from there. Michael, we'll let you go first.
Am I old because I'm an old man or just an old guest?
You're reoccurring. You're reoccurring.
Probably
You're now a Doc Talk staple.
I am, I guess. Okay. Yeah, I'm a staple. Mike Blatt from TBC Guides, technically in New Hampshire, but a lot of water fish in Vermont, right on the Connecticut River. So get to do both sides of the border. And this is our first talk about ice fishing officially, where we get to have another crazy ice fisherman on here with us, which is really cool, so that the rest of you guys, you kayak fishermen, realize that I'm not alone in this. So it's great to be back again. Chad, thanks for having me again. And yeah, Doyle, thanks for joining. And just can't wait to talk ice fishing to someone who's further north or more in the ice than I am.
Doyle.
So yeah, my name's Doyle Smith. What is that now?
Those are the geese flying south.
Oh. It's the geese flying south.
Oh, geez. Still got geese here. Plenty of them. My name is Doyle Smith. I'm a kayak angler, but through half the season, I'm in the ice. So we got like 4 or 5 months of hard water that I fish with a lot of my friends. I do a lot of photography work, and I have a YouTube channel. It's called Eastern Ontario Adventures, and I put a lot of my stuff up on there.
Very cool, yeah. And Doyle takes a lot of our photos for the Orion Coolers. Very, very good photography there, and we appreciate Doyle and his eye and all the work that he does for that. So, my gosh, ice fishing. I'm cold just thinking about it. I broke out my best flannel just to talk about ice fishing because it makes me cold, fellas. It makes me cold.
Doyle, will you just please tell everybody how warm ice fishing can be and just how you stay warm?
You guys are bringing hot chocolate.
I mean, there's lots of ways to stay warm. I think my friends and I, we've built up this kind of tolerance to the cold. And it's something that we kind of train up towards, like starting in December, I'll still walk my dog out in slides and walking without gloves and stuff like that, just wearing little clothes as possible. You got to build up that tolerance because typically we're out there in like -20 and, you're not wearing a jacket, gloves off, dealing with the fish. But you can get super warm. I've tried to convince a lot of the kayakers to come out. Will, he refused to come out. I know James, if you guys remember James, we tried to get him out a few times, but nobody seems up for it. But you can make it super warm, and you get like insulated ice fishing huts, and you got portable heaters, and you can just dress super warm and layer up. That's what I used to do when I started. Just no hut, no heater, just like wearing as many layers as possible.
Absolutely. Now, talking about ice fishing, before we get into the things you need, let's get into the technical stuff. We've all been on the lake. We've all, seen fish finders, done the different things, map study. What do you guys do, like, to locate these dudes? I mean, because you can't really just run around and scan. I mean, without drilling a bunch of holes in the ice, seems counterintuitive. So, how much time do you spend pre-ice using a graph, locating these fish to try to pinpoint them for their winter holes as they move that way?
So you just have to know kind of the behaviors of fish in that temperature. This water can be 32.1 degrees. It can be 33 degrees, just depending on, if there's any current underneath that ice, how much ice cover there is. But typically, if you are fishing around a solid green weed line in late October, early November, and then all of a sudden that ice freezes, those fish are going to start coming up from the depths to right where the break is. And then generally right outside of a weed line is where they will sit and ready for ambush of anything smaller than they are. And so if you know where those weed lines are as a regular fisherman or kayak fisherman, and that body of water freezes, go drill some holes in front of that weed line. And 9 times out of 10, you're taking that drill and you're drilling down in 5 feet, 7 feet of water, but those weed columns come almost to the surface. So you start pulling out weeds when you're drilling, that's a good sign. You just move further and further, and it's not about graphing it. It's just kind of, it's why we take that many fishing rods and that many tip ups and set up that many holes, because the fish might be here, the fish might be there, the fish might be there. So it's not an exact science. Some people do have their fishing holes where there will always be a fish, but it just depends on the body of water you're on.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And I agree with Tyler said in the comments there. He said structure is king. So, I mean, fishing a lot of rocky points or any like down logs or weed beds are a great thing, depending on what you're trying to fish for too. All fish aren't going to be in the same places or same depths. Typically at the beginning of the year, we do find pretty much everything relating to those weed lines, but at least here, a lot of the panfish and the walleye, they tend to get deeper and deeper as the season goes on. Water temperatures change and the weeds do slowly die, so the fish are still moving around. But if you want to hammer like some pike or whatever, definitely stick around in the weeds and you can go through tons of pike, panfish, whatever.
Cool. Very cool. Now, what all species are you guys tackling in your areas during the ice season?
Whatever we can get.
It's kind of whatever you're feeling on the day. However, I don't know how the seasons work there, but we have like the province. I live in Canada, so I live in Ontario. The province is split up into several different like zones of fishing, and different species of fish. You can only catch certain species of fish at certain points in the year, right? So in the zone that I'm in, I can't fish for a rainbow trout or brook trout or lake trout until January 1st.
Same in Vermont.
Like I can't after March 31st. I can't fish for pike and walleye. I have to switch off to like panfish. There's some species that are open all year round, like perch or catfish or whatever. But yeah, it really depends. So up until January 1st, it's usually panfish, pike, walleye. Then for the first 2 weeks of January, there's a lot of stocked lakes around that get stocked in the late fall. And then you really want to be out there that first week of January or the first 2 weeks of January, because those lakes get hit hard and people just get there, they pull out all the fish, they keep them all, fry them up. So if you want to catch them, you got to get there early in the season. And then it gets pretty tough to do any trout fishing after that, unless you want to go on some crazy adventures and walk for 2 hours into the woods, typically.
Sounds
cold, gentlemen. It sounds cold.
I'm going to jump back to that cold, because there's, so taking people ice fishing for their first time is 9 times out of 10, it's their first time. up here. And we have people who are skiing up here for a week in Vermont, New Hampshire, and they want to do something different. They find me on Google or on Airbnb experiences. Like, oh, I've always wanted to try this. And I had one cancellation last year. This lady called me up and she said, so I didn't realize it would be cold. And I said, well, I mean, the term ice fishing, it's in the title of the activity. There's ice. And it was 28 degrees. The sun was shining. There was no wind. But the thing that people don't realize, if you've never been skiing, you have to know you have to put sunscreen on when you go skiing. All of those little flakes of snow are little tiny mirrors. Mm-hmm. And if you've ever been out on the water on a cloudy day or under a shade, you know that the sun reflects off the water. Well, it reflects off the snow as well. And when you're out there and it's 25 degrees, 30 degrees, it is warm. And you're in maybe your ski clothing, let alone ice fishing clothing. And if you're walking around and trudging through any kind of fresh snow, any slush, I mean, you're burning calories. And in some of the shallower lakes that I go to, if you don't get to your tip up in time when the flag goes up, that fish only had one way to go in 5 feet of water, and that's that way. And so you have to run to your flag. There were days last year, I was checking my step counter on my iPhone. I was running a 5K, fishing 4 hours.
Wow.
And it was toasty. But back to those species, the pike are always great. I was very happy with myself this year. I caught my largest pike in open water that I've ever seen. And this lake, the only large pike I've gotten, and the river where I am, have been through the ice. For some reason, the largest pike that you can land in the nation is under the ice. They move a little bit slower. They're more attracted to certain styles of bait. And there's certain laws with certain numbers of hooks from state to state, country to country. But I mean, some of these fish are 50, 60 inches long, weighing 25 pounds. And it's really cool. It sucks when the hole is not big enough to pull them out and you have to get the hook out of their mouth. But when that fish squeezes just enough out of that hole and you see how long it is and how big that is and can barely hold it up, it's worth being out there in the cold.
Yeah, I can't agree more. Like a lot of the fish that I've either caught or some of my friends have caught, we fish a lot on ice that's borderline not even safe to fish on it. And I know I wrote an article a while back about catching walleye for first ice, and a lot of those really apply to any predatory fish. And for whatever reason, in that early ice season, they're super aggressive. And you catch them real shallow. I could be catching walleye in like 6 feet, 5 feet. It's crazy.
Now, Michael, you said tip ups. So for the viewers that may not know, because like people like me live in Indiana and it really doesn't freeze all that much. Tip ups, vertical jigging. Do you guys want to kind of go through and explain the difference?
Yeah, I think Doyle might be better on the jigging side. I don't have that much patience. So tip ups are kind of the way that I go. So tip ups vary in style. You have your lay flat, and then you have the style that I use, which has a spool on the bottom. You have a stick basically that goes through the ice. The ice is here, and then right here there'll be a flag. And there'll be a little trigger system when you hook that minnow down through the ice. When that spool gets pulled, it trips a trigger, and that flag will point up like this. And you're supposed to see it. And when you get to see it pop up, it's really cool. You know when it happened. But when you don't pay attention to one flag, and it's usually the one that's the furthest away over your left shoulder, where it's, and you have to get there before the line runs out. But in certain states, so in Vermont, you can have 8 tip ups per angler. So per licensed angler. So I can have 8 tip ups with live bait on it. Doyle can have 8 tip ups. You can have 8 tip ups. I know some guys who basically have their truck bed is removable, and they take that out on the ice, and it's a sled, and they have 50 to 100 tip ups, and they'll invite friends out to come fishing so they can set up more tip ups.
It's kind of a similar situation here for tip ups, but we can only have 2 lines. It doesn't matter if it's a rod or a tip up, like you can only have 2 lines per person in the water.
Wow.
At all. And your tip up can only be 60 meters away from you. It has to be less than 60 meters away. And we, I don't know if you guys, but we put on like bells on the tip ups or something, or just something to make the noise, especially just so you can hear it. And like, once you hear that bell go off, your heart is already like pumping like crazy. And you also didn't mention that you got to say fish on. That's very important, or else you probably won't catch that fish.
Your buddies won't know.
Yeah, exactly. And there's got to be pics, or it didn't happen. My phone's ringing. Ryan.
We always have the woo. No matter where you're at on the lake, me and one of my buddies just to mess with each other. There's a woo, and just like the Berkeley commercial where it's like woo.
It's hard to fake a flag going off, though. I think.
Yeah.
Somebody did it. It's a very quick way to never get invited to fish with me again. My wife did it jokingly one day. I wasn't listening to anything she was saying out on the ice, and she said, "Oh, flag." And I was like, "What?" She's like, "Okay, you listening now?" And she never did it again, but it was just to prove a point. But I say that to be in with, like, if you guys want to be funny and call flag or tip up or fish on, you'll get invited to fish with me. Never again. So Doyle, I do want to show you something. I had some extra dollars laying around this year, had a very good guide season, and I got targeted on Facebook for this product. And I was like, you know what? Let's try this thing. Let's just see what it does. So this is a Bluetooth transmitter that attaches to your flag. Okay. Now, when it's in the down position, it stays quiet. But as soon as the tip goes up, you can program the sounds. I don't know what sound I put on this one. Let's see.
There you go.
Yeah. So you can't have your flag. And this is, so people are talking about, I don't want to be cold. I can be in the hut. Yes, you can set up 2 tip ups, set up your Bluetooth, and you can sit in your tent. And when your phone goes off, guess what? The flag went up. But when these flags, I can't remember I should know the laws in Vermont. You can't be a certain distance away from your flag. Definitely not out of sight. But these go up to 350 yards away.
Wow.
Again, pretty sure that breaks the laws of Vermont and New Hampshire. I know you can't live on the lake, set these up, go in your house, and take a 4-wheeler. Again, that's illegal. If you try to do that and any of Fish and Game see you, it's a hefty fine. This was more of a novelty. I wanted to see if it worked. This pair cost $100, and it's fun to have when you have people on the ice. It's their first time fishing. Let's say it is -10 one day, and you say, "Well, how do we know the flag goes up if we're sitting inside?" And so this is what I have to combat that solution. So we'll see how it does. The other sounds are hilarious. There's a semi truck sound. There's a pickup truck sound. There's a tip up. There's a nuclear warning sign. It's anything you could imagine. They've come up with everything.
That sounds
Jesse
like
says he can stay warm in a tent and have an alarm. Tell me when a fish is on. Sign me up. Yes, Jesse. They are called Blue Tips, and I do not represent this company. I do not get anything for this, so don't buy anything until you talk to me first. Let me see if I can get commission for this. Tips.
You heard it right.
TIPZ.
You heard it right here on the Orion Podcast Network, courtesy
Shameless
of Jackson
plugging.
Kayak.
Yep.
Doc Talk.
I know a couple of guys that I've fished with before who are big into carp fishing. They'll put their bite alarms on their on their either like dead stick or on a tip up. And it's pretty sweet. Oftentimes, though, I would say that my phone more often than not dies when I'm fishing, ice fishing. So I don't know how long. I don't know how long that would last for us.
You're gonna have to quit calling all them ladies out on the water, Doyle.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, you know me.
There is a product you can get that keeps your phone warm nowadays. So if your phone does die from being cold, there are things that you can get.
Panther Vision's got those fancy dancy portable hot hands now, which are sweet, rechargeable. Everybody needs those. I need those. Just for
I don't know. You guys are bringing too much. You guys are bringing a lot of tech into it. All this stuff costs money.
I think that brings up a really good point, Doyle. There's a lot of people in the kayak fishing world, especially in tournaments, who are going live. They're going 360, and there are ice adapter kits to all of these systems now. I'm curious, have you used one? Do you know people that use them?
I've never used a live scope, but I've seen a lot of people using live scope, and I don't know. I don't know how to feel about it. I would have mixed feelings about it, but the main reason, I don't have a reason to not like it other than the fact that I don't have one. Right. I think maybe if I owned one, I'd be on the other side of the fence. I don't know if there's anything as making it too easy to catch fish. I think that's a lot of people's argument. You still gotta fool the fish. You still gotta get that fish to bite your line at some point. So I mean, there is a little bit of an advantage having it, and you can kind of tilt it and see structure around and stuff without having to drill more holes. But I mean, if you have silaging, you can still get that information on a fish finder. And either way, when it comes down to it, the fish is not going to eat if he doesn't want to, or if you can't trick him into biting your line. So even if you can see, you can see the size of the fish and every detail of the fish that you want. But
there is an interesting. There's an interesting podcast. There's an interesting podcast that just come out a few days ago. The Village podcast with Chris and Trey Zaldane of Bassmaster with Tom Hungerford, and they're talking about a study on the live scope and how the fish react to it. They went out on a specific lake, went around, looked for these fish that were marked, and then hit them with the live scope because they knew where they were at. So they was able to go out there, hit them with the live scope, and see how they reacted. And it's pretty interesting. So if anybody's looking for something to watch on that pretty fascinating little podcast to check out. So highly recommend it. I'm not going to tell you what happens because that just ruin your whole podcast experience.
And I will, shout out to Trait Zaldane for jumping on the bandwagon with Eagle Claw and getting that fishing rod that she made by a woman for women. I have 3 of them. My daughter has one. Her biggest smallmouth bass was caught on Trait Zaldane's rod. I love that. It's a perfect walleye rod. If you look at it, Doyle, it is made for walleye fishing, but is killer for 2 to 3 pound smallmouth bass for young anglers. It's a perfect bend. And I love it. I really love what she does. I love what both of them do.
Now, as far as shanties and stuff like that go, I know you guys talk a little bit about that, the pop-ups and the different things. And I believe you both use the pop-up style. Any plans on building the super shanty?
I prefer, personally for me, because for permanent or big ones, generally you can't move it around, right?
Right.
So, and I don't really ever fish the same body of water that often. I like to travel. I like to go around and see where the fish are and move to where the fish are. And it's a lot harder to do that with a permanent hut. And here you have to register your permanent hut. You can only have it on the ice like a certain amount of months, like within different zones. So if I was fishing the Ottawa River, you legally can only have your hut on the ice from January 1st to March 31st. But if you're fishing in the southern zone, you can only have it from January 1st to February 28th or whatever. But it would be nice to have once in a while. And maybe it would, for me anyways, I would benefit more from renting someone else's big, nice hut for a night or two than having and building my own, just because I move around so much.
Right. That makes sense.
And there's the first time I went ice fishing, this guy had two shanties. He had the decoy shanty that he set up between his and another guy's so that nobody else would come ice fish at this one spot.
Oh yeah.
We'll get into etiquette later on. But once you have that freeze and thaw, if you have any warming period like last year in February, we had a significant rain event up here. 45 degrees, rain, broke ice dams. I mean, it was brutal, but everything refroze. But when you have everything getting wet, refreezing, you can't move that until everything thaws, and you run the risk of it, basically thawing into that body of water.
Right.
So if you have these beautiful trailers I see for sale every day on this one Facebook page, for $50,000, $10,000, these great camper style RV trailers with basically holes cut in the floor. They're really cool looking. My wife wants one of the sleds, looks like Santa's sleigh.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It has a wood stove in it. That's what she wants. And there's a guy on a lake close to me here, Lake Maury, who has one. It's red, it's silver, and he looks like Santa. It's really cool. But he doesn't have any holes cut in the floor. He just uses it to sit, warm up, set his tip ups, and he just looks out his window, to see when they go up. But they're really cool. There are there's a really cool spot in the Adirondacks, Battlefish Charters in New York.
Yep.
One of the Jackson team outfits as well. He has an ice village. He has 3 or 4 tents, I think, bought a couple of them, and a couple were gifted to him as well, but he ends up connecting all of them, and you can do overnights out there. And it's really cool. That would be something I'd want to do, and those 10-person tents are $1,000.
Oh yeah.
So you get a couple of those, put them out there. I see a bunch of people spending the night out there. The whole sleeping on the pillow with your rod under your pillow like this, and getting woken up by your fishing rod. I don't know. I dropped my phone from the bed to the floor. I can only imagine what's going to happen if there's a hole, in a 30-foot deep pocket of a lake. I just don't trust myself.
Speaking on the ice, there's a couple of ice fishing communities around where I live where they'll have, it's almost like driving downtown, they'll have a road plowed down the middle, and then they've got 40 or 50 permanent huts, and they're all just side by side. But for them, it's not as much about the ice fishing and catching fish. It's more about the build of community. I don't know how much fish they're catching. I've never gone over there, but it's more about just a community and kind of hanging out. And speaking on the hubs getting stuck, there's a lot of people, it's super common, even if it snows 30 centimeters or 12 inches. We
can do the conversion.
So many trucks get stuck, and people's just ice huts get stuck in the snow. It's brutal, and it's very fun for me to watch.
It's kind of like launching the boats in the summer.
Yeah.
Well, and there's a lot of people who rely during the winter on salvage.
Mm-hmm.
There's some guys I know that work in the rescue squad in town, and their winter job is they work tow trucks and salvage vehicles. And Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire, you can have 24 inches of ice. You can drive onto it with a full size 2500 series truck. And then 3 feet over can be 2 inches deep, 2 inches thick. And when these in Lake Winnipesaukee, I mean, there are places where it's 120 feet deep.
Yeah.
And these cars go for a ride. Now, people are like, oh, okay, we'll claim it on insurance. You know, we lost the car. Guess what? It is illegal to leave a vehicle. It's vehicle abandonment.
Yep.
And you get fines, tickets until that thing gets out of there. So you have to get a tow truck out there, some kind of salvage vessel. And I think in one weekend we had 3 or 4 vehicles that were brought up to the top, and they're full of mud. You know, it's not like you can save these. But this is the livelihood of some people throughout the winter. You know, if there's no ice, there's no business for them throughout the winter. And unfortunately, somebody might have to lose a vehicle. But like Doyle said, there's a community. Somebody sells bait. Somebody sells firewood. Somebody, you know, makes the best cup of hot cocoa around, or somebody has been working on a certain mash all summer long and makes the best questionably legal liquor in town.
Most generally, yeah. What's the one in Minnesota called where they like literally? It's a tournament, is what they call it, but it's not really as much as a tournament as it is a large community gathering to partake in adult beverages. What is that called? But I mean, it's like they fill up the whole lake.
It's called Tuesday.
Yes. Maybe Wednesday.
It's most Saturdays up here.
So, how deep is the ice that you guys are drilling now? You guys are really just getting first ice, pretty much, aren't you?
3 inches, or what's that in centimeters?
Oh, I don't know. I use inches for the ice. But yesterday I was on 4.5 inches roughly.
Right.
Yes. Yesterday I caught my first ice fish for the season. A couple crappie, a couple panfish, bluegills. But I've been checking ice in tons of spots all week. And on Wednesday, I believe it was 2.5, maybe. And we still tried to go out there as safely as we could. Had some 2 guys miss a muskie.
No,
unfortunately.
But around here,
yeah, it's been. This is late for us too. I mean, I can remember last year or 2 years ago catching fish like midway through November on 4 or 5 inches of ice. So it's been a warm fall, and but I think it's going to be a very cold winter. So.
And we're early up here compared to last year. Last year I looked at my photos from last year. I was still kayak fishing on the river on December 14th. We had like a 70-degree spell. I mean, it was only live bait. It was basically ice fishing from a kayak with live bait.
Right.
But the places that I found today were 3 inches. Some other spots were like 3.5. I have 10 people coming out fishing with me next week. They called me probably say 2 or 3 weeks ago. I sent them the link to this podcast. So they are probably watching. So now I can be very honest in saying that I was a little afraid I was going to have to give your deposit back or, make up something that we could do together to catch fish. But I prayed very hard for some ice, and it is coming through nicely. I had to move their trip 2 days down the road. So next Thursday instead of Tuesday, because we have some cold nights that are going to add that 1 extra inch of ice. Doyle and I spoke briefly over chat just about, and he has this great chart of safety of ice, which I almost memorized.
Yeah.
The conversion factor was a little hard, but I was like, you know what? I know what centimeters are. I know how long my skis are. I know how long my sole length is on my boot, which is all measured in millimeters. So there is a safety factor, not just for yourself walking out on ice, but if you're a guide and you're taking people out, you need to know how much weight that ice will take. And Doyle, I would love for you to elaborate on the safe ice that you walk out on.
Yeah, that's important.
There's two kinds of ice. There's black ice and white ice. Black ice, it has no impurities. It's much stronger ice, and white ice is kind of ice that's been frozen and melted or mixed with snow or something. It usually has more air pockets in it. It's a lot weaker. As a rule of thumb, generally you should not really go out on less than 4 inches of ice. And if you're going with a snowmobile or an ATV, you want to be on 8 inches or 10 inches. If you're going on an SUV, you want to be out on 14 or something. You definitely need to be smart about it and have experience in cold water situations or in cold situations, and have the proper gear to be ready if there is going to be a breakthrough. I mean, they make float suits, and my friends and I, we all are extremely cautious, and we all wear, we'll go out in life jackets, full winter gear on with life jackets on. Or some of my buddies have like those $600-700 float suits, or those big red suits, and then you have to be knowledgeable about how you are able to get out of the water if you do fall through. And a lot of companies make ice picks that you want to wear all the time. I don't, until that ice is
you basically wear them around your neck. It's like you don't. They're like the strings on your hoodie. I don't have any next to me, but basically they are ice picks. And if for some reason you fall through, grabbing on ice is kind of hard. So you just take these two things. I have Rapalas, which have finger grooves in them, so there's no slipping, and you just basically use them if you need to climb out. I've never had to use them. I've never fallen through ice. I don't take trips. I do not take anyone out on the ice if I fear for my own self falling through the ice. That's why there's a lot of people that will go out to pockets of rivers and lakes that will look for people that have drilled holes. And you go out there like, oh, nobody's fishing, but there's holes drilled close to shore. And right away, okay, that's a test hole. I'm not going to fish that yet. Right. There takes a couple days. So this weekend we have a couple nights that are close to 8 and 9 degrees Fahrenheit, which is really good ice making weather. Next week we have 2 and 1 degree nights. Yes. And around you want Christmas, those clear skies. Yeah. So, and like Doyle said, black ice or clear ice, if you can see the rocks underneath the ice in 3 to 4 feet of water, that's good ice, especially when it's 3 and 4 inches thick. Yeah. And they make tools to check the ice as well. Like you can get a big heavy bar. It's called a spud bar. And, those things weigh 40 pounds, and if you can get through the ice on one whack, then that ice is probably not safe. So, and the reason that you want to make sure the ice is a certain thickness is because if there's any current or springs under the water, it's not a consistent 4 inches all the way across. So, I've been ice fishing off of current lines where I'm sitting on top of 10 inches of ice and I'm fishing, in 2 inches of ice. So it's something that you have to be really careful for, especially in the early season, because and snow as well actually will really diminish the quality of the ice.
It acts
because
as
the
an
ice
insulator.
doesn't get, exactly. So
it gets
you have
insulated.
to be really careful.
Yeah.
So big talk is, like, as far as your ice fishing season goes, how long do you guys really think you'll be out there? And for this season, is it something that just a few months, or are you planning on a long haul for this year?
My best fish this past year was March 6th, and that was on the river. We have setbacks on the river or little ponds, areas. I don't fish out in current. I don't go beyond, the river where I am in the Connecticut River. It's dam controlled, and I do check the flow just to see if the ice is going to go up or down where I'm going to fish. But I never go out where I've ever seen current. That's not my thing. And then I got to go to Florida in the middle of March last year, which is a nice little break. Get that fresh sunburn on you. So I came back, there was still ice. I was fishing by April 1st. So the ice was here, then the ice was gone. And then you get to read about the guys who are rescued on Lake Champlain on March 27th.
Right.
For going out on 18 inches of ice. But guess what? The wind blows out that way. You're going for a ride.
Right.
Which just happened in Minnesota.
There's a lot of spots on Lake Ontario or anywhere with like big current that will just take away. And everyone's seen those TikToks of penguins jumping from ice to ice.
Or
that same thing. Floating. Yeah, exactly. Like that same thing's going to happen on those big bodies of water and in currents, really. And some big bodies of water will just produce their own current. Yeah.
But there's also great things about ice fishing. We've gone on all the safety aspect. So guys, if you don't know what you're doing, ice fishing can be dangerous. If you've never ice fished before, go with a guide or find somebody who likes you enough to take you out. There are bodies of water, especially in the state of Vermont and the state of New Hampshire, that are they're protected. So no boats ever. You can maybe fish from shore. There are town water supplies that are only open to fishing from shore or no fishing at all. But when it freezes, completely legal to fish. So imagine a body of water that isn't fished until January.
That's crazy.
And there's a place 20 minutes down the road from my house. I took 2 trips there last year. One of the best 2 days of my ice fishing career. It was incredible. And it's the town's water supply for this town in Vermont. And the pike were 40 inches long. The bass were 6.5 pounds. You also have to understand the large and smallmouth bass. These are the heaviest the fish will ever weigh throughout the year.
100%.
They fattened up from the fall. They're holding everything in. So when you get to weigh those things on a scale, they are so much fun. And they are actually legal to keep. You can keep them. You can harvest them. You can eat them. A lot of people don't eat bass during the summer months because of everything else they eat on. And some water quality, in the middle of summer is not the best. You don't want to eat fish from that pond. But during the winter months, that water is crystal clear. And there's nothing growing in there. That's the healthiest that fish will ever be. It's the cleanest that meat will ever be. And that's when they say, if you want to eat a largemouth bass or a smallmouth bass, you catch it under the ice.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for us, there's not a lot of places that you can even target bass in the winter. The season closes, mid-December. I think it closes this Saturday.
Interesting.
And then it opens up in July next year, I believe. So there's not a big window for catching bass, but the same thing goes for a lot of the other species. Walleye are by far, I think, the most targeted for harvesting. Nobody wants to harvest pike from that Y bone. And for the different bodies of water, I think there's a lot of ponds, but you're not supposed to fish them here. There's a lot of no fishing signs, although there are some that you can get away with. But unfortunately, with all the new kind of developments with housing and stuff coming up, a lot of those holding ponds I think they're going to get ruined in the next couple of years. So that's kind of unfortunate. But some of them hold some monster fish, like real giant fish.
Yeah, I think for around here, where I'm at, we basically look at crappie, bluegill. There's a few walleye. It's not a real big thing here. It's more of a DNR. Our walleye are more of a DNR project. And, Southern Indiana opposed to Northern Indiana, we really truly have a line that divides the state in half as far as where it's super cold and where it's not as cold. And we don't really get that much ice. We might see 4 inches a lot of times. Last year was actually probably one of the first years in a long time that we had ice that was safe enough for the guys to truly get on. Other than that, yeah, I mean, we'll have 70-degree days here and there or 60-degree days come off and on throughout the winter. And it's just, we've got weird weather. So it just, a lot of times it doesn't work out for us. But there's a lot of guys that'll go up to the lake and they'll fish off the docks and vertical jig and whatnot. And it's a good time.
I have a funny crappie story. So Chad, with your marketing prowess, you're going to love this. Last year, the Vermont Fish and Game had this virtual cooking event. We're still coming down off of COVID, and things were still a little more virtual. So they decided to hold a cook with us crappie taco night.
Ooh.
Well, if you're not familiar with the fishing world and the fish of crappie, how to say crappie, all you're reading is crappie tacos. One person showed up to this event online, and it was one of those marketing mistakes that I wish more people would talk about. But I mean, it's a delicious fish. I have found crappie accidentally for my first time this year. Mm-hmm. The minute after I accidentally hooked an 85-year-old snapping turtle, that's a whole other story. That was a phone call to Vermont Fish and Game. I almost lost a finger. It's alive. It's fine. I mean, it looked like the turtle from what was that movie back in the 80s? Never Ending Story. That's what that turtle looked like. But 5 minutes after I got that turtle off of my hook, I caught a 12-inch crappie on a chatterbait. I was going for bass. And now that I know there's crappie in there, and then today when I was drilling holes, all these guys had these rods set up. And I was like, what are you guys fishing for in 12 inches of water? We're fishing for crappie.
Yeah.
And I didn't know there were that many crappie in there. I can't wait to go back.
Oh, yeah. And crappie, like you guys are talking about, the bass being the best eaten. I mean, crappie, cold weather crappie's some of the finest cuisine in Southern Indiana, or anywhere for that matter.
To go back to the crappie for a sec, I only caught my first crappie this year.
Oh, wow.
From my kayak in the summertime at a lake that, again, wasn't even supposed to have crappie in it. So I can't wait to go back to that lake. And it's connected to a series of lakes that I'm assuming now are all going to have crappie. So it's definitely going to be something I'm going to target next year with the boys. And then yesterday when I went ice fishing, that was my second crappie ever. First ice fish of the year was a crappie.
That's awesome.
And they're fun little fish to catch. For sure.
Now that you've pinpointed them, will you be taking Uncle James?
I want to take James for walleye because I know he's going to want to eat some. And I know he's going to want some nonstop action. He's an action guy. And if his personality will take over if things get too boring. So we got to keep him.
You got to keep him from
veering
off to the side.
But I have a couple places I want to take him. However, I know with how the ice has been freezing so far, the places that I want to go are probably going to be another 2 weeks before they're safe. And even when they are safe, it's going to be really sketchy, I think, just because of the current that it's going to come through some of those places. But we'll see. I invite him every year. So
now you guys are two ice fishing junkies. You both love it. But let's so you hit a point through the summer where you're like, man, I'm ready for fall. I'm ready for ice fishing. At what point through ice fishing do you say, man, I'm just ready for the warm. I'd like to get back in my kayak and just be free and move around. When's that feeling
I don't
hit?
think I've ever said that before.
We have
gosh.
ice in and we have ice out. I would say the ice out season, that mud season, when there's no ice to fish and the water is just so cold that you really can't catch anything else or go out and have a good time. There's never really a day. I would say it's like the -10s, -20s, where even in your tent, it's still cold. But it's when I stopped getting business, when I stopped getting phone calls for trips, I'd say that's it for me.
Ready for the warm.
To speak on the cold, it was -40 multiple times here last year. And the first weekend that it was -40, I thought it was a good idea to sleep in my hut overnight. I think that's the only time I ever regret doing that.
Would you tell the American listeners to this where Fahrenheit and centigrade meet?
-35.
You scared our Texans.
-43.
Oh, really?
-43 Celsius and Fahrenheit meet. So, okay. All right, keep going. I want to hear this.
So
You're scaring our Texans.
Yeah, like the overall fishing and stuff is great, and I have a lot of gear. Like, I'm not going to go out there unprepared. My suit is rated to -50, and I have a sleeping bag that's rated to -40, and my ice hut is double lined and double insulated, so it's not the end of the world. The end of the world was when we went back to the car and it didn't start.
Oh man,
that was the end of the world, because there's not a lot of places that I go where you run into people very often. So getting it back up and running was a bit of a trick, but definitely something to keep your eye on. And since then, I think I've gone like 3 or 4 times. And it's crazy because you will get so hot typically. I don't know if you walk to all your spots, Mike, or if you have an ATV or a four.
No. I walk. I don't like vehicles. I love my truck. I see people drive out where I go, and not my thing.
Because sometimes you'll walk like a mile to your spot, and you're just like you're overheating like crazy, and you're taking off your jackets and stuff. And even if it's -50 or -30, -40, like you're still getting really, really hot. And I've posted a few pictures, I think, on Instagram now where I'm, my face is just all covered in ice, but I'm still sweating. And got a big smile on my face. Because I love that feeling. To be honest, I don't think I've ever said it's too cold. I've said other things about the cold, but I've never been like, let's go home, I'm too cold. Actually, that's not true. That's not true. I did say that once. Because the very first time that I went ice fishing, I was extremely unprepared. And it kind of in the -30 mark, and I did not have real winter boots at that point in my life. So I went out in steel toes and with just thick socks. But once my feet got wet, you don't really have a way to dry them off. So I do have frostbite. I have permanent skin damage and frostbite on 3 of my toes. So at that one time, it was definitely maybe a bit too cold. But
if any of my guests are watching this right now, this will qualify as a weather anomaly or act of God, where we will cancel your trip, and that deposit is refundable. We will not go out in -30.
No,
but
hopefully it doesn't hit -30 in the States.
Yeah, I don't think it ever. We got down to a -20 degree day, but it was that was on a mountaintop. That was while skiing, and I don't know how they run schools in Canada, Doyle, but we are required to read a short story in 7th grade in the U.S. called "How to Build a Fire," which is all about an old man in Alaska trying to get across, and basically failing at life.
Right.
and it being unprepared, exactly what you're talking about. So
yeah. So I don't leave I don't leave my house now without a way to start a fire or a way to cook food. I'll always keep that stuff in my car, and like an emergency first aid kit, which will usually have matches in it or something too.
and
Just a good idea.
I usually carry Victory beers. Vermont and New Hampshire have great microbrews. So I will sometimes for my guests, or they'll bring it with them. And a lot of them are high octane. They're 8%. They're double IPAs. They're double porters. And if those are frozen, that's our cue to get off the ice. It's I don't care how warm you are, but if that third beer has frozen, you're warm, but it is not, and we're leaving.
I have to tell you a story about that then. About so going back to those negative.
Rudy wants to know if we're providing meals served with local ice wine.
There you go.
I mean, for a full day trip, I always provide lunch, and I'm from New Orleans, so I take my lunch seriously. But I want to hear Doyle's story.
So I believe the temperature was negative 42. One of my buddies, those little portable ice heaters heat off of those little green propane tanks.
Mm-hmm.
Those little green propane tanks are filled. Well, like the air inside of it turns to liquid at a certain point if it's too cold. Yeah. Well, we figured out that temperature is negative 42.
Wow.
When he turned his heater on, the liquid started leaking out the tank, and he almost caught his hut on fire.
Oh my God.
Because the fire was literally everywhere on that day.
This is one of those Darwin Award kind of things.
Some of the things that my friends and I get up to, it just, if you knew us, like there's a phrase that's common around people who know me who just say, "That's such a Doyle thing."
Okay. Is that where the okay.
We got
going. That's the end of the story, really. That's like things only happen to that either to me or in the presence of me. Just something that you could never think of, but that would happen. Like something bad is going to happen. You don't know what it is, but something's going to go wrong, and it's only something that would happen to me.
At least it keeps it interesting. I mean, everybody needs that friend, though. At the same time,
Doyle. Yep.
So with kind of closing out this thing here as we're getting close to the hour mark. As outdoorsmen, fishermen, what's on that list for Santa? What's the one thing that you boys want for Christmas?
Oh, well,
if Santa Claus was bringing it, and he is real, by the way, for any of you kids listening out there, he is real. Yep. What's Santa bringing you?
I got a little impatient with Santa this year, and I'm Jewish, so Hanukkah is usually early. So I don't look up when Hanukkah starts until, I don't know, December 1st. And sometimes it's in November. Sometimes it's on Christmas. This year it's on Christmas. But I wanted something to attach to my ice sled to let me use my kayak fishing accessories. Mm-hmm. And they didn't make a sled like this. And so I realized I had all of these old gear tracks and parts from kayaks. And I started saying like, all right, well, I can attach my fish finder here. It'll raise it up 18 inches. So I don't have to go down here to the ice to look at my fish finder. I'm going to use the NAR gearbox that I have, connect that to the side of my jet sled. And then I took the rod holders from the NAR, and I'm using that to hold my drill and my bite. And now I have an empty jet sled. So all my gear I was putting inside the sled is now attached to gear tracks on the outside. And I'm hoping to. I don't think I can patent this because it's using a lot of kayak fishing accessories, but there are some plans in place where I can share this model in the near future, and it's really cool. I can fit everything in the back of my truck, but now everything I've taken everything that I can't use for 3 to 4 months out of the year, and now I get to use it. And I will have some photos I can share in the next week or so, hopefully next couple weeks. But yeah, I was so jealous of Santa's sleigh, especially watching Santa Claus 1, 2 through 7 with my 7-year-old daughter. That all the cool stuff they made for Santa's sleigh throughout those movies, I wanted on my jet sled for ice fishing. So I just made it.
Just needs tri-track.
Just needs tri-track. Yeah.
That'd be cool.
Is this like an ice fishing thing that I'm?
It don't have to be ice fishing. It can be a camera, man. It don't have hey, whatever you want from the big guy.
I don't know. The only thing that I can think of that I would not purchase for myself is like an 85 millimeter camera lens, like a nice prime, like a 1.4 maybe, or an f2. That would be really nice and crispy. I don't have anything in that focal length, and there's a lot of nice photos that I use. I have a giant Canon lens that I use for a lot of my photos, but if I got an 85 or something, I would replace that probably and save me a few pounds on the trip.
Yeah.
And if you're walking out for 30 minutes to go ice fishing, you want to save as much weight as possible. So that's probably what I would ask for.
I picked up a cheater lens, the Tamron 28-200. So far, very fun. It's got a wide aperture, but it's got a wide range. Really stupid happy with it, man. It's a very versatile lens, especially, like I said, the aperture as you go out to 200 gets a little narrow, but it starts at a 2.8, so it does a lot of things well. Be worth checking out.
Yeah, we can do a whole other podcast on camera gear.
That's probably a whole other podcast. We can get.
I would love to learn lenses. You guys are just speaking Greek to me right now. Doyle, I'm curious. These places that you walk, are these out into open ice, or are there houses? Are there shorelines?
It depends. Some places you'll have to walk down an ATV road to get to a lake. My car's not going to go down an ATV road, especially one covered in snow. So, I have snowshoes just for walking to places, and I have cross-country skis just to get places farther. Even on some of the rivers here, like the Ottawa River, one of the places that I fish it is probably 4 kilometers across, or 5 kilometers, to get all the way across. And I'll walk 2.5 kilometers to get in the middle from where you have to park the car, because there is limited parking. But a lot of the places that I like to go, there's minimal houses, maybe a couple of cottages that people go to. But I honestly, one of the things I like is to get as far. I'm trying to get as far away from people as possible. Typically, I don't want to be competing. I don't want to be competing against those villages of fishermen. For fish. I like going out there and seeing like 1 or 2 other pop-ups, and that's my kind of environment that I like to be in.
The reason I ask, and I will share this secret with ice fishing, if you guys have lakes and ponds that you fish normally throughout the year, especially in a kayak, and you meet the people who live on these lakes and ponds. Sometimes it takes a bottle of wine. Sometimes it takes inviting them out to a beer. But there's one section of one of the lakes that I visit that you have to walk to, like Doyle said, all the way across because you can't park anywhere. And luckily this fall, I caught a really nice fish, and one of the gentlemen that lives there shares this house with his 6 siblings, and it was passed down through the generations, and they're all the grandkids of the people who own the house. They take turns having the house. Introduced myself and just said, "Are you here in the winter? May I park in your driveway?" And it cuts the walking out, sometimes an hour out of walking, and it makes such a nice day. And it just the relationships with your local homeowners on some of these lakes. You're not just one of these guys in a hood and goggles walking out on the ice. You are somebody that they've met, and then they invite you over for dinner, or they're like, "Hey, my son and my daughter are out here. I want to go on a ice fishing trip." They become guests. And it's really cool. You never know who you're going to meet on the ice. That's one of the things that I have found out. It's way beyond skiing. It's the people out on the ice. You really never know who they are. If they have a house out there, if they're going to write an article about you,
right?
It's really cool. Just some of the diversity of people you meet out on the ice while fishing.
Definitely.
And there's always fishing communities, whether it's on the ice, in the boat, or on the bank. I think there's a fishing community at the tackle shop for everybody, and it's one of the really cool things about our sport as a whole. So with that being said, I'll let you guys tell everybody where to find you on the socials, how to contact you if they want to do some guiding or just want to hear more stories. And go.
You want to go first, Matt? Or?
Go ahead, Doyle.
Well, you can reach me on Instagram. It's probably the best way, at Doyle J. Smith. And my YouTube channel is called Eastern Ontario Adventure. But if you Google Doyle J. Smith, it will take you to any one of those things. And I post photos quite a bit on Instagram. Like Chad said before, I do a lot of content for Orion and Jackson, and a lot of that stuff will be popping up soon as the ice becomes a little bit thicker, and I will be posting, or I'm going to attempt to post weekly videos on my adventures. So if you want to check that out, feel free to drop by.
There you go.
And if Jackson has anything to say about the quality of any of your photos you are taking, just say, "You know what? I need a new lens."
Stop it, Mike.
Here's what I want.
Mike, mute. Mike, mute.
No, I've seen your photos, and I jokingly said something to Jameson and said, "Hey, can I interview for Team Orion? Like, what do I have to do? Like, take better pictures than this." This is the guy that takes the pictures. Okay, I know who I'm up against now. I'm not a photographer. I won't claim to be a photographer.
You might
Blatt,
know a guy.
You can find me at TBC Guides on Instagram. I do want to do shameless plugs this evening because my new winterized website is up, and that is www.tbcguides.fish. .fish cost 50 cents. .com cost $3,000. So,
Woo. Wow!
As we're saving money for live scopes, that's where we decided to put our money. There's a gentleman by the name of Thomas Corrado, or Tommy Corrado, as he is in my phone. His signature is on the bottom of my website. He is a sophomore at Dartmouth College, and he came to me last year. I was working for a tech startup, and he said, "How did you get into this? Who are you? What do you do?" He bought me a cup of coffee, and he is an extremely talented web designer. He did an internship this summer at the Washington Post in web design. Don't hold that against him, but he's absolutely brilliant. Today, he got my email notification working for my reservation system. My reservations have quadrupled this year versus last year. because of what this kid has done. I'm sorry to say a kid. He's 20 years old. I think he's 20 years old, but we all started somewhere, and he's absolutely gifted in what he does. And the way that he captures what I'm trying to present to people wanting to learn how to kayak fish as well as ice fish is absolutely amazing. Also, Jackson Kayak, thank you again for having me on the regional team in the Northeast. And last but not least, Outdoor New England, which is in Franklin, New Hampshire. And if you guys don't know, if you are thinking, why do I need to buy a kayak right now in the middle of winter? They are 25% off.
25%.
And anybody who runs a store has room to store a kayak for a couple months.
Yep.
If you're wondering what's going to change next year, guess what? The 22 NAR, we put some foam blocks underneath the seat. And if you don't have the foam blocks, you get the foam blocks. They're free.
Yep.
There was an extra screw added to the rudder system. There was a few things added to the seat that are amazing upgrades, but do not let that fool you with the 25% off of every single 22 boat that is available right now, because this is going to go away if you're waiting till January 1st. I don't get a dime for telling you guys to buy Jackson kayaks. Jackson will be like, thanks, Mike. Thanks for the plug. I'm not getting a check for it. It's just a cool time to buy a kayak because it's off season. And then next year, I can't wait to see what's going to come out. I do know for a fact there is nothing new coming out besides the Coosa X.
No, nothing new in this coming season.
There's nothing Chad can lie about right now. Nope. There is nothing coming out. This is it. So
we got two very cool boats that come out in 2022. And Coosa X will be your big 2023 boat, along with the 2023 NAR FD and the Flex Drive Mark IV in all the FD boats and Blue Sky Boat Works. So that alone, for a 2022 boat, whether you're looking for a Blue Sky Coosa FD, Bite FD, or the NAR, now's the time to jump on one and grab that Mark IV, because that thing's amazing. It really is compared to the other drive. Not that there was anything wrong with the 3D version of the Flex Drive, but this one here is just, man, it's so sweet.
And thank you again, Marty from Outdoor New England. My Coosa X, I think he said it's arriving tomorrow. We're supposed to get 18 inches of snow. So whoever's driving that truck for Jackson, thank you very much. It's going to stay in that warehouse for a little bit. I might use it as a sled.
We've done it.
It's gonna be there for a while.
They don't sled as good. The fishing boats don't slide down the hills as good as you would have hoped. You need a whitewater boat for that, but you know where to find one of those.
Also, Outdoor New England, they carry all Jackson's whitewater boats, and in February there is a snow downhill event for you whitewater boaters, creek boats, play boats, you name it. I think it's insane. I'm 40. Am I 40? I'm 41. I'm 41. My back's not going to take that. But if you guys want to race your play boats down a wintry slope in Franklin, New Hampshire, it's happening in February.
Man,
if you don't have a boat,
find a rock star for that. We could find a rock star for that. All right, guys. Well, Doc Talk will be back. So we will not be back until the 27th. So with that said, we wish you guys
yourself a merry little Christmas.
And we will see you guys back
and
on
happy
Hanukkah. Or not the 27th. I was wrong. 29th. Right before New Year's.
From now on,
sing it for us, Doyle.
I can't sing, dude. I can't. I'm not even.
Everybody have a good holiday. We will see you guys on the next episode. Thanks for watching.
A merry little Christmas.